So today we're going to continue on with the health and disease topic, and we're going to take a closer look at cardiovascular disease. I'm going to go through some notes on cardiovascular disease, so everything that I've got written down in my book, please take down in your book. You will need it on Friday when you do the Show My Homework quiz, okay? So before we look at cardiovascular disease, it's important just to know what that word actually means. So if we look at the word cardiovascular, we can split it in two. One half of the word is cardio, which refers to your heart. The other half of the word is vascular, which refers to your blood vessels. So cardiovascular disease will affect your heart and it will affect your blood vessels. Okay, just so we're all clear on the functions of your heart and your blood vessels, okay, which hopefully you do already know, okay. The function of your heart is just to pump blood all around your body, okay, and the function of your blood vessels is to allow blood to flow through so that it can get all over your body. Okay, so your blood vessels are kind of like the pipes that blood can flow through so that it can get from your heart all over your body. Okay, blood is needed in your brain and it's needed right down in your toes. It needs to be able to get from the heart all over your entire body. And when we're looking at blood vessels, there are 3 different types of blood vessels, okay? And you would have learned this in year 8. But your 3 different types of blood vessels are arteries, veins, and capillaries. I'm not going to go through the difference between them right now. But just know there's 3 different types of blood vessels, but they all serve ultimately the same purpose. Blood is going to flow through your blood vessels, okay? So if we look at the function of the heart and the function of the blood vessels, they're both involved with, transporting blood around your body. But why is it so important that blood flows around our body? Okay, we know it's really important that our heart beats and pumps blood, but why is it so important? Why does every part of our body need blood flowing to it? Okay, in order to understand that, we need to look at blood in a little bit more detail. Okay, and when we're talking about blood, there are 4 different components of blood. And when I say components, I just mean that there are 4 different things that make up blood. Hopefully you'll be familiar with them. You definitely will have come across them before. Okay, so I'm going to reveal the 4 different components of blood. Okay, so you have got red blood cells, you have got white blood cells, you have got platelets, and you have got plasma. Okay. Your red blood cells are obviously cells, and their job is to carry oxygen all around your body. Your white blood cells, which we will look at in a lot of detail later on, their job is to fight infection. Your platelets, their job is to clot the blood. And by clot the blood, I just mean that if you were to cut yourself, you would start to bleed, okay? But you don't just keep bleeding and bleeding and bleeding. Eventually, the blood stops flowing and you form a scab over the wound. Platelets are involved with forming that scab. Okay, so if you didn't have any platelets and you cut yourself, nothing would stop you bleeding. You would just continuously bleed and bleed and bleed. So it's really important to have platelets in your blood so that when you cut yourself, you can form a scab and you don't keep bleeding. Okay, so these 3, the red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets, they all count as cells. Right here, they are all cells. And because they're all cells, they're all solid. Okay. If I were to ask you what state is blood, if it was a solid or a liquid or a gas, you would all tell me liquid, okay? And the reason is because there is a liquid part of the blood. So the plasma is the liquid part of the blood. And all of your cells, which are obviously really, really small because they're cells, all of your cells are suspended in the plasma. And your plasma, being a liquid, can then flow through all of your blood vessels. Okay, if your blood was solid, you wouldn't be able to pump it around your body because solids don't flow. So it's important that your blood is liquid, but within that liquid, you've got solid cells suspended so that the cells are just carried along by the liquid part of the blood. And this liquid part of the blood, the plasma, it's actually yellow. Okay, so I know when we think of our blood, we always think of it in being red. The only reason it looks red is because there are so many red blood cells in the plasma. But if you were to separate out the cells from the liquid part of the liquid part of the blood is actually yellow. Okay, so this is blood, okay, made up of 4 different things, each with a different function. But we were wondering why it was so important that blood was carried all over our entire body. And if we look at the different components of blood, I've already highlighted it here. The one that's really, really important are the red blood cells because they carry oxygen. So when I say that blood is needed all over our body, the reason blood is needed all over our bodies is because oxygen is needed all over our bodies. Okay? Why? Why is oxygen needed all over our bodies? Okay? You would have learned this last year as well. Okay? I'm going to reveal. Okay? First sentence I want you to write is cells will die without oxygen. Okay? And if your cells die, then your organs will die. So if the cells in your liver start to die, then eventually your whole liver will die. Okay, so your cells make up your organs. So if they start to die, then your organs are going to be affected, and cells will die without oxygen. Okay, the question is why? Why do cells need oxygen? Hopefully you know this. Oxygen is needed for respiration. Okay, that's why every single cell in your body needs oxygen, because every single cell needs to carry out respiration. And hopefully you'll remember, I'll write it for you if you don't, that respiration takes place in, I'm sure you're all screaming at your screens, takes place in the mitochondria. So if you looked at the structure of your typical animal cell or even your plant cell, the part of the cell that respiration actually takes place in is the mitochondria. Okay, so what exactly do I mean by respiration? Okay, respiration is a chemical reaction. And it's a chemical reaction between glucose and oxygen. So you get glucose from the food you eat, you get oxygen from your red blood cells. And in the mitochondria of your cells, the glucose and the oxygen react with each other. And when they react, they form carbon dioxide and water. And the purpose of respiration is not about making the carbon dioxide and the water. You actually breathe them out because you don't need them. The purpose of carrying out this reaction is when this reaction takes place, energy is released. Okay, you have done this in chemistry. Well, at least I know my class have. When you do a chemical reaction that releases energy, we call it an exothermic reaction. So don't worry, because I know some of the classes have been studying different content. Don't worry if you haven't come across this word yet. You'll do it, I'm sure, when we go back. But any reaction that releases energy is known as an exothermic reaction. And respiration is a classic example. When this reaction takes place between glucose and oxygen, we're forming carbon dioxide and water, but energy is released in the process. And this energy is really, really important for the cell to survive. If the cell's not releasing energy, then the cell will just die. So if we look back at what we've done and kind of look at the bigger picture, okay, so I have told you that you need to pump blood all over your body, but let's just look back at why. Okay, you need to pump blood all over your body because blood carries oxygen, and every part of your body needs oxygen because oxygen is needed for respiration, and every part of your body needs to carry out respiration because respiration leads to the release of energy. And without the release of energy, your cells will start to die, and that will lead to your organs starting to die. Okay, so it's really important that blood is pumped all over your body because it's really important that oxygen is pumped all over your body and that respiration can take place. So just as kind of a rough example of what would happen. So obviously depends on which body part, but for example, some of your limbs, so like your arms or your legs, if they were to go without blood for a couple of hours, if there was no blood getting down to your foot, say for a couple of hours, and there was no oxygen getting to your foot, then the cells in your foot would start to die, and it would come to a point where the cells were not as you wouldn't be able to save them, and your foot would just basically die, and there would be no treatment for it other than just to amputate it and cut it off. And that would be after just a couple of hours of blood not reaching your foot. Because if blood's not reaching your foot, oxygen's not reaching your foot, respiration's not taking place, energy's not being released, your cells in your foot are dying, then your whole foot will die. Okay, that's like your limbs will go a couple of hours, but other organs, like your brain, for example, can only last a few minutes. So if something stops blood flowing to your brain and stops oxygen getting to your brain, within a few minutes, those cells are going to start to die. And depending on which part of your brain is affected, it can lead to different types of brain damage. So it's really, really important that blood can flow all around your body. So if you have got a cardiovascular disease and there's something wrong with your heart or something wrong with your blood vessels, and then that is going to be a very serious disease. So I'm going to flick over the page. And we are, so if you didn't get any of the notes taken down on the previous page, then just pause that video so that you can finish taking things down. We are now going to look at the causes of cardiovascular disease, and one of the main causes that we're going to look at is diet. So in the last video we looked at what malnutrition was, and we saw that malnutrition was when you had too much or too little of a certain nutrient. In the case of cardiovascular disease, we are talking about having too much, and we're talking about having too much fat or too much sugar. And the reason is that too much fat and too much sugar can lead to obesity. So you should all hopefully be familiar with what obesity is. Okay, so if you're obese, you are very overweight and you've got quite a lot of fat on your body. And the reason that's so bad for your cardiovascular system, for your heart and your blood vessels, is the larger you are, the harder your heart is going to have to work. And if it's working really hard, then it's more likely to become fatigued or to become tired. Also, if your heart is having to work really, really hard, you can end up with high blood pressure. So when I'm talking about blood pressure, I'm just talking about the force of which the blood is flowing through your blood vessels. And if the blood is flowing through those vessels with a lot of force, that can damage your blood vessels. High blood pressure is not good for your blood vessels. The other problem is just that the blood vessels themselves can become clogged with fat. If you have too much fat in your diet, you can literally clog up your blood vessels, which I'm going to show you here. This is a picture from the textbook. So the top image here, we have a healthy blood vessel. You can see the blood cells moving freely through. But the picture here, you can see all the fat building up in this artery, and it makes it very difficult for the red blood cells carrying the oxygen to get through those arteries. And down here, you've got a more extreme example where you've got lots and lots of fat, and all the blood cells are clumping together and forming a clot. Okay, so depending on the body part that you're getting this blockage in, it can lead to all sorts of things. If you're not getting blood to your heart, that can lead to a heart attack. So if the artery carrying blood to your heart gets blocked, you can have a heart attack. If the artery carrying blood to your brain gets blocked, that can lead to a stroke, okay, which can result in permanent brain damage. It's really, really important that those arteries aren't getting blocked. But having said that, okay, while I'm kind of warning against a high fat diet, fat also has, fat is also good for you, okay? Fat protects your organs, fat insulates your body, you can get energy from fat, so it is important to have fat in your diet. I'm not saying fat is bad, but it's important that you don't have too much fat in your diet. And they have this thing called body mass index, which is used to estimate the amount of body fat that you have. And it's a simple calculation. You take your mass, or how heavy you are in kilograms, and you divide it by your height, which is in meters squared. And that will give you a value. And if your value as an adult is over 30, then you are considered obese. And if the value is over 25, then you are considered overweight. And the reason they use this BMI calculation is because people are different heights. You can't just say that one weight is healthy, because depending on how tall you are, a different weight will be healthy for different people. And they use this body mass index in order to estimate just your body fat. It's not entirely accurate. Okay, there's some cases where it just doesn't work. So, example, if you are an athlete and you're incredibly fit and you have a lot of muscle on your body, muscle is actually heavier than fat. If you've got a loss of muscle in your body, you're going to have quite a high body mass, and you can do this calculation and get a value of over 30. So you can be a very fit athlete and then have a BMI that tells you you're obese. So in some cases, it's not going to be accurate, but for the typical average adult, and this calculation will give you an indication of kind of how much body fat that you are carrying. And it's just something to keep an eye on to make sure you don't have too much fat in your diet. I'm going to move on to the next video because I can't go over 15 minutes. So just go on to the next video, which will continue with this topic, just a few more minutes of notes. And then I'm going to give you some questions to do. So go to video number 2, please.